I'll start off with just some introductions. So you have two hosts for this evening's travel chat. Myself, my name is Laura Ham, and I'm from co-owner of Traverse Journeys, which is a small group and custom and self-guided travel company. Before 2020 hit, we were bringing people around the world in a few dozen countries, and now we're doing what we can to stay engaged and talk about travel virtually and host these events. So yeah, that's me. And then our other co-host, Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andrew Tyree. I am the founder of Coast to Costa Travel with my wife, Natalie. We're excited to be here and to chat about travel because we can't travel right now. So at least we can kind of talk to you guys about, travel and things happening right now. Yeah, I'm based here in Los Angeles. I've started Coast to Costa in 2012. We specialize in doing group cultural travel, mainly in Latin America, Cuba and Mexico being kind of our main things, and Peru. But yeah, I got back in the end of February from Peru was kind of my last trip. And then we found out my wife was pregnant, which is amazing. And then all this COVID stuff happened. And now, 2020.
Here we are.
Here we are, exactly.
Everybody's become experts of Zoom.
Experts, so good at Zoom. So good at Zoom.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off a little bit more of what we're doing these days. A lot of you are joining through finding out about the event from our meetup groups. Some of you found out through Eventbrite or social media. So we are hosting these virtual events a couple times a month. Sometimes they're sort of travel themes and topics like tonight. And then sometimes we do like destination specific events where we sort of virtually travel to a specific country. And we, have people joining the event from those countries, our local guides usually that we use. So yeah, definitely, if you're looking to scratch that travel itch while you're waiting to travel, check out the events that we're hosting. So tonight's event, we are talking a lot about safety in terms, of travel and reconsidering, travel planning and whether or not, you should, and if you do, what that looks like. There's been obviously a lot of talk and conversation and articles written these days about, places that you could travel or, what to think about or what to do when considering traveling. So we just wanted to touch on that. So hold on, I'm just gonna keep admitting some more people to the room. So as I mentioned, it's an informal event, and you're welcome to pipe up and type into the chat box or even answer a question or address anything that's talked about during the event. So participation is encouraged. So the place that I sort of wanted to start the event would be, just talking in general about the idea that, after 6 months of, the pandemic, there are definitely places that are, starting to open and encouraging signs about potentially starting to travel. However, there are things to consider. So the WHO, World Health Organization, and World Tourism Organization have mentioned that there are 40% of all destinations now have eased restrictions that they had in place for COVID-19. 53% of all destinations are still completely closed for tourism. So, we're kind of looking at a little half and half situation at the moment. Because we are a US heavy group tonight, we're pretty much just focused on that. If you are joining from outside the US, feel free to pipe up and let us know, and we can touch on that as well. So with the restart of tourism, there are lots of things to consider. beyond just whether or not a place is going to let you in. um, so here we have like some promising signs in terms of people are still optimistic about traveling, and there's lots of people that are considering and hoping to travel in the next 6 to 12 months. This data is a couple months old, but just gives you the impression that if you're one of these people that are hoping to travel the next year, you're definitely not alone. So just a short list here of some of the things that I've thought of in terms of considerations. So obviously the first one being travel restrictions, whether or not the border is open, but also, countries that are maybe open often have very specific rules and regulations for for people coming in, whether that's, having to get a negative COVID test before you depart or on arrival, having to purchase specific kinds of travel insurance, or having to quarantine in the country when you arrive. Another thing too that's could be the case is having to quarantine when you get back to the US, depending on which state you're from. Anything else about travel restrictions, I guess? I think that's most of the first, tier of things that we have to look at. And then Andrew and I had talked about this a little bit. So not only is there the risk of whether or not you may get COVID or contract COVID while traveling, which seems to be sort of a top of the mind, lots of people are thinking of that aspect of traveling. The, really very important other part of that, that some of us might not be thinking of as much, especially being from, with the fact that most of us are from the US, is the idea that, when you go anywhere, whether it's another state or certainly another country, there's the risk of spreading COVID. So, just because a country or a region is open, is it a responsible or good idea, to go there, and what you can do maybe to be as responsible as you can. Does anybody have anything to weigh in about that or add to that idea? Feel free to pipe up.
Sure, I could say something. I was planning on going on a trip heading south into Mexico on October 15th. And what I was planning on doing is just always getting a COVID test anytime I try and go from one country to the next. So that way, when I'm crossing a border, I can wave my little paper and say, look, I got a negative COVID test just 2 days ago. And I know some countries require that, but I'm just going to do it anyway because I don't want to feel like I'm spreading anything, And I'm just going to be super careful that I don't catch anything. So I don't take any chances. I don't hang out in crowded bars or anything like that. But what I'm going to be pushing up against is the hard restrictions where they just won't let you in the country. And so I'm planning on heading into Mexico on October 15th, and then I'll be there about 2 months. And then I want to fly to Bogota, Colombia, which I understand is just totally closed right now. You just can't go in there. But what I'm hoping is that by December 15th, the Colombians will say, sure, come on in, And if they don't, I'll have to do a backup plan, which is like hang out in Mexico longer or else go to Brazil, because I understand Brazil is open now. Right. So that's the way I'm looking at it. And I'm going to be traveling around for the next year and a half, and I want to try and pace myself.
You got time.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna see. I can always go slow. That's the thing. If I hit a closed border, I'll just hang out another month in Mexico or another month in Brazil or something,
Okay.
And, but I'm
where are you going to start in Mexico? Sorry.
First flight to San Francisco to Puerto Vallarta, and I'm going to be there a week, and then I'm going to head inland over to San Miguel Allende, and I'm going to be there for a month because I want to study Spanish and get my Spanish really, really good. And then I'm going to head down to Mexico City and then off to Acapulco and then down the coast and then back into Oaxaca. And ideally, when I get to Oaxaca, I want to fly to Colombia. And you can just fly Oaxaca to Mexico City and Mexico City to Colombia, but they may stop me. They may just block me and say I can't do it, in which case I'll go from Oaxaca and spend like another 2 to 4 weeks in the Yucatan or something, and then try and go south. But the one thing I'm worried about is that I may not be able to get COVID tests down there. They may have such a limited testing infrastructure, and they may be hard pressed to, give those COVID tests to the locals because they don't have that many to go around. And I don't mind paying for the COVID test. I know I'm not going to get it for free or anything, but that's one thing I'm concerned about. Like if I was in Oaxaca, I'd want to get a COVID test in Oaxaca before I get on the plane. And I'm just hoping the city of Oaxaca has some clinic where I can, get a COVID test. So I'm going to have to figure that one out.
Yeah. Yeah, that might be something to look for, like some Facebook groups, for expats or something in Oaxaca, and you can ask that question. They might know of, the specifics that are hard to find, just through Google searching. But just to kind of circle back to your first point there, that's a great point, and definitely something that, I was going to mention as well, is just, regardless of, even if it's not required, as a responsible traveler, getting a COVID test before you travel is definitely a good thing to do before traveling, like I said, even to another state. And as well, for anyone who can, there's also the idea of like quarantining yourself for a week or two before you travel, just to limit the possibility that you might contract it in the week, in the time leading up to your trip. Anything else that people wanted to jump in and add about, how
if I may jump in a little bit on that also. I think your route is really great. First of all, the Puerto Vallarta to San Miguel, I like that you're going there to study Spanish for a little while. With Laura, I agree that it's really great to have a COVID test before you go to a place, because like she was kind of saying, like we're kind of worried about where can we go, but we should be worried about like, how to responsibly go to that place. I think that's that's awesome that you're being like conscious of that. Your route is really rad. I have people in Oaxaca, so we do trips to Oaxaca all the time, and I can ask my contacts about a clinic if you need to. Like we have, like she was mentioning the Facebook group, we've been going to Oaxaca for Day of the Dead for the last like 5 years or so. So we have really, really good people on the ground. If I don't know, leave your email maybe in the chat part, and I can write to you and get you like like my people down there will know like a clinic and COVID test and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I would have, or a couple questions for both of you, is, I have been reluctant to do a lot of traveling in Mexico because of the cartel violence down there. And, I've been trying to look at, the COVID and what areas, are less under control than others, because as other places are limited, Mexico, and for me particularly, like the Yucatan, Caribbean coastal area looks attractive, and I haven't been there before. So I have been trying to stay really safe here. So I just don't want to be, I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get killed. I just want to be able to enjoy life a little bit. So are you all seeing that as just being really safe? Is it?
Andrew, do you want to? I feel like you have a lot more Mexico expertise.
Sure. Yeah, I'll take this one. I feel like Mexico, while Mexico gets a really bad reputation, more so than it deserves, especially in the last couple of years. Admittedly, there has been cartel stuff, cartel violence, and specifically cartel violence against tourism, but that was about like 10 to 15 years ago mainly. And that sort of reputation is spilled over because it was such a strong reaction that they had. There was kind of like an internal governmental thing that was going on versus the Mexican president versus the cartels. It's much safer than it has been in years past. As far as like the COVID stuff goes, you have to be kind of diligent about where you're choosing to go and figure out, because as we all have seen it, everything just shifts so quickly. Like New York was just such this hotspot, and now New York is doing great. And us in Los Angeles, we were doing fine for a while, and now it's through the roof here, and now it's kind of leveling up. As far as like figuring out the COVID, I would monitor that part. I would highly, highly, highly recommend going to Mexico though. The Yucatan is beautiful. You can fly into a town called Merida, and get a car and drive toward the coast. And there's little tiny towns to stop in along the way. it's charming and cute and slow pace of life, and the food is really good and people are really nice. Just check and make sure it's not like a COVID spot when you're trying to go. But I would a million times recommend going to Mexico. I absolutely love Mexico. So
I mean, I used to go a lot to Mexico.
Yeah.
With everything in the last some years, and I kind of look at it
Yeah.
like gangs here. You know, they
Yeah.
are discriminate about who they kill. If you're in the way, you're gone. But
Sure.
so that's good information to hear. And would you say the same for like a solo or sola female traveler?
Good correction of your Spanish. First of all, your Spanish is impeccable. Well done. Muy bien, muy bien. It's like with everywhere, kind of like you were saying. Like I live in Los Angeles, and there's just like gang violence here in Los Angeles or
Yeah.
Chicago or New York. There's, you know, we live in the United States, which isn't, you know, like all fine and good all the time either.
No, it's not.
Right place at the right time. Keep your
Yeah.
head about you. Be aware. Don't be, you know, be very, very like aware at all times, just like you would anywhere else. Crime can happen anywhere. You know, it's.
I'm not worried
these
about
things-
the basic crime stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not worried about that. I've traveled a lot.
Yeah.
I'm worried more about the, you know, the really violent stuff. So.
Yeah, I think those things just get blown so far out of proportion. I've just have spent so much time in Mexico when there's protests and these things, and I get back and people are like, oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? When it's completely blown out of proportion. We have a tendency to kind of demonize what's happening in Mexico a little bit more than it's deserved, in my humble opinion. I think you'll be fine. You sound like a seasoned traveler. You'd be good. Just be aware, be sweet, like, you know,
Okay, thank
sweet
you.
and hard at the same time.
And I would say,
Yeah.
if Philip, since you obviously have investigated this, if you have any comments too about what you
Yeah, and it looks like Linnell, you were trying to jump in there.
Well, just as a solo traveler, I've been to Mexico on my own too, and not since COVID. My last trip ended just before this all started, but I go by myself all the time, Susan, and I just really super careful. You know, I make sure I'm somewhere where, you know, it's a safe part of town. I don't go out at night by myself in the bad part of town. You know, it's just like forgot his name, was saying. Andrew was saying, just be careful, you know, just like you in your own town, you'd be careful. And I like to go this tiny little town, surf town, and there's been no COVID there at all. So I'm going to be super careful before I go back in February.
Which town?
It's near Ziwa.
Nice.
Idaho. Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to
I know.
I don't want to turn it into
like,
Sayulita. It's not Sayulita.
Don't. Yeah, of course, Sayulita. That place.
But I'm just telling Susan, just, you know, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. And it looks like Andrea added in the chat box as well that today the Department of State issued a major expanded advisory about Mexico regarding crime. So it sounds like there's some up-to-date information coming from there.
That's always a good thing to check on those too, because those things change all the time.
Yeah.
Again, though, they put out the advisories. I'm always very cautious about things, especially when I'm taking a group of people, but they get advisories for nothing, for peaceful protests and things like that. I be aware and be cautious of what you're getting yourself into and check in on those advisories and things, but also I say take them with a grain of salt, says I.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, media for sure. The US can sometimes get a little carried away, shall we say. I also wanted to talk about Shelly's question in the chat box that I see here. So kind of shifting gears a little bit. She's asking about like being able to go to a country that might not be letting Americans in if you're coming from you know, another country, like for example, like within Europe, if you're, you know, in Spain as an American citizen, can you travel, you know, to Germany? And, you know, there might be, I mean, that's definitely one of those things where you check the embassy website for that country, get the exact specific up-to-date information. But I will say that in general, what I've been seeing over the last 6 months is that where you're living or residing or have been recently doesn't really matter so much as your passport. It's really just your passport by and large. Even if you've been living in another country, you know, the fact that you have an American passport is often what's going to determine whether or not you can, you know, travel elsewhere. So yeah, it's, you know, maybe doesn't make the most sense, but I guess they're just trying to think of, you know, ways to do a widespread, you know, rule. So other things that are, you know, good to consider, we kind of have touched on a couple, but I just wanted to go over, obviously, you know, the size of your travel group. So, you know, if you're traveling by yourself or with friends or family, that's obviously, you know, kind of the most safe and controlled way to travel. We've started, you know, offering a lot of like custom trips and self-guided itineraries for 2021, knowing that, you know, that's going to be just a lot more preferable for a lot of people as opposed to joining, you know, group tours. If you do consider group tours, you know, the smaller the size of the group, the better, obviously. You know, traveling in a bus of 50 people, you know, even into 2021 is probably, you know, not the greatest idea. And it's also true for, you know, where you stay, hotels, you know, like the bigger hotels. I mean, some people think that, you know, they're preferable because they have these sort of strict, you know, rules and regulations, you know, the big hotel chains. But a lot of times, you know, B&Bs and boutique hotels, you know, where you're, you know, only maybe 10 guests at a time staying there, are still going to do, you know, practice very good sanitary and hygiene practices. And, you know, there's just a lot less people that you'll be around. Same with transportation, you know, big, traveling, you know, in public transit, buses and trains obviously carries more risk than, you know, traveling in a you know, smaller vehicle. I know airlines are something that people have been talking about, and there are definitely like some airlines that are better than others in terms of, you know, how they're handling things and whether or not they're selling to capacity in the middle row. So, you know, that's something that you can look into if you are considering flying, you know, which airline maybe offers the best current practices. Something that also a lot of people don't think about is not just, you know, again, COVID, it's not just about COVID numbers, you know, where you are or where you're going, but it's also, you know, some countries are considered higher risk, even though they have very low COVID numbers because of the access to and the quality of healthcare and hospitals. So, you know, if that's a concern for you, that's definitely something, you know, to also be thinking of, you know, where you're going, you know, if anything should come up, you know, will you be able to manage that?
Do you have any particular information on that? Because I know one of the things that I've been, you know, I've been trying to look at all of this a lot because, as was said, it you know, just changes all the time. It's
Mhm.
you think are really doing well aren't. So one of the things I've looked at is the death rates compared to the cases.
Mhm.
I don't know that we're doing that great here, but at least trying to get better than we're doing. You know?
Right.
So, I mean, that's a way to say, hey, they had these cases.
Yeah.
And then again, it, you know, some of it depends on kind of the region, because if you're in, just say you're in a place like Mexico, if you're in Mexico City or Cancun or, you know, someplace like that, you're probably going to be able to access better care than if you're out, you know, if you're just a, you know, a campesino and you're out in, you know, in the mountains and it's going to take you 6 hours to go to the doctor, you know, and
Yeah.
that's go into their mortality rate.
So the CDC, their list of, you know, travel advisories does take into consideration, you know, the access to healthcare as well as the COVID numbers. So, you know, when you're looking at the CDC countries, you can, you know, be aware. And then there's also, I'm just going to share my screen here. There's another, there's this think tank that has published some articles, or Forbes has published some articles about the studies that this think tank, Deep Knowledge Group, has done. So they've been ranking countries based on their risk factor, and they're actually taking into consideration like 100 and some different parameters and points of data when they're determining risk factor. So as you can see, you know, quarantine efficiency, government efficiency. So all of these different factors are taken into consideration when they are determining, and you can see these are the top 20 countries. I'm not sure, I know that the writing is very small, so I'm not sure if you can see this. But yeah, it's an article in Forbes magazine talking about the risk levels of different countries and all the different factors that have been taken into consideration to determine that.
Can you indicate what the article is?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah. I will put it in the chat box. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and there is also, sorry, here's the CDC. So CDC, as you can see, has the virus transmission rates and the healthcare capacity. And so the CDC gives these countries the level 2, risk is moderate. I didn't even include any countries that have level 3 or 4. So these are the level 2 countries. And then we have level 1, Fiji, New Zealand, Thailand, same profile me. And then these are the no travel health notice. So, sorry, just trying to get back to my ability to screen share here.
And it seems like the CDC can be trusted for things that are outside of our country, at least. They won't be politically influenced.
Meaning what?
They won't be politically influenced.
Oh.
Politically loaded question, sort of, but
Throw it out there.
sorry.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the CDC is meant to be a non-political organization that is, you know, objective.
Non-biased.
Absolutely. So I've just also included the link to that Forbes article that talks about the safest countries based on a variety of factors. Does anybody else have anything to add in about these thoughts or ask? Okay, excellent. Well, yeah, I think there was just a couple other things that I was going to touch on in terms of things to consider. So yes, the other one here, let me just get back to the thing, whichever, would be...
I have a real quick thing. Did Shelly Nelson took herself off mute? Shelly, is that on purpose? Did you have a question?
No, oops.
Oh,
That's an oops.
I was like, I think she's gonna ask something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if I'm talking too much, feel free to just,
no.
jump in the chat and say, hey, I want to say something. So so access and quality of hospitals and healthcare. Also, you know, another thing that I know that Forbes article talks about is it also talks about, like, you know, socially speaking in that country, like how accepted are the, you know, COVID restrictions and how many people are abiding by them and things like that. So it talks about, you know, just because like masks are required, like, is that actually happening on a social level? So all kinds of things like that. Oh, hello, furry friend.
My dog, he keeps trying to jump on my lap, so I'm just gonna, to lighten the situation, talking about COVID. Here's Reggie the dog, yay. All right.
Obviously, another big one, you know, travel is you know, financial investment. So, you know, anything that you're thinking about doing or booking, really need to investigate your transfer and refund policies. So, you know, a lot of companies are offering a lot more flexibility these days, but not all. You know, some airlines, it's still the same old you know, policies for changing or canceling your flight. So you really got to do your research these days, because, you know, as much as you might think it's this way right now, you know, things obviously, as we know, can change quickly. So, you know, giving yourself that assurance that you have options if your travel plans need to change is an important thing to consider right now. I mean, like, I know at Traverse, we're kind of doing a very flexible booking policy where we can just transfer all of your payments, you know, to a future date, if the you know, date needs to be, or the trip needs to be changed. And a lot of airlines, you know, are doing things like that as well. I think United has just come out to say that they have gotten rid of change fees forever now. So just like Southwest, they now are never going to, reinstitute change fees. So that's something good to come out of all this.
Be nice of them. It's the least they can do, though, United. They owe me more than that. I'm just saying.
Actually,
yeah.
Scott's Cheap Flights just had an article just on that today about which airlines are doing what with all of the refunds and all. So that if you want to look that up, it's
Awesome.
just today. Yeah.
Yeah, Scotch Cheap Flights is a great resource. Definitely.
Really
There's
good
another
to know.
one I'll just include. It's another Forbes article, not by any intention. It just happens to be. But it goes over the best and worst airlines, kind of ranked by a variety of different parameters. So you can check that out too. Let's see. So yeah, I mean, the other things that were on that slide, I think, just looking at population density and crowds, I think a lot of people going forward, at least, in the short term, are really going to be focused on probably more nature-based trips and, getting out, away from people more often than not. Be careful though, if you're thinking about, like small towns and rural areas versus large cities, because again, that think about like the risk of spreading or bringing COVID into those small communities is something, that even though, you think, oh, it's great, I won't catch it while I'm there, make sure that you're thinking about bringing it with you and how you can mitigate that or consider that. And then, just the things that you want to do and see, if they're open, if they're safe. A lot of countries, and I know that like Americans can't travel to Europe for the most part, but just as an example, a lot of like beaches and like Greece and Spain and stuff like that are limited in capacity, and museums and other sites have a lot of new capacity limits or other rules and regulations. So you kind of got to do the homework and investigate things much more than ever before. What else have other people been coming up with in terms of, what to consider before, travel planning or thinking of travels in the, future? Anything? Let's see, Andrew, is there anything else that we were talking about?
We went through with our company about maybe like 2 months ago, and we wanted to go and just kind of adopt our practices to be as sort of COVID safe as possible. I did find that kind of like you were saying, so the places that will stay typically are always private owned, smaller, kind of more bed and breakfast type of places, as opposed to like larger hotels or like small boutique hotels. Almost everyone that we contacted in Mexico and in Cuba and Peru and our places in Colombia, all of the people that we work with, everyone was already on it. Kind of one of the things that Laura and I were talking about beforehand is there's sort of this delicate balance of a lot of the places that we travel to are dependent on tourism. It's sort of their main source of economy. It's their job. It's everyone I work with, they're completely out of work right now. So myself and my wife, about 2 months ago, we were like, okay, let's try to figure out, it's like to get this as COVID safe as possible for when things start opening up. All of our people they were 3 steps ahead of us. They're sitting there, they're waiting for things to happen. They've already upped their, you know what I mean? They're like, let's get COVID compliant before they ask to become COVID compliant. So I think one of the things that's just kind of important, if you are going somewhere, just check in with them. Because you want to stay in a place that is sort of taking the appropriate measures to do so. But again, these people, that's their job. And right now they've been out of work for 6 months. So they're making everything as COVID safe as possible in preparation for people being able to come again. So that's one of the things that was really, that kind of like eased my worries about being able to bring people to these foreign countries again. I'm like, oh man, is everything going to be okay? And I talked to across the board, every single, contact that we've had. They're like, yeah, we've already thought of that. We're doing that already.
Absolutely.
So it's just important, like if you're going on your own, if you like Philip going to Mexico, like just check in with your people and be like, hey, is your hotel COVID compliant? Is your XYZ, are you, taking the appropriate steps? One of the things in hotels, which I thought was kind of cool, you can ask them that they just don't come into your hotel for the week. Like if you have a room, they won't come in and do cleaning procedures. They'll sterilize it and give it 24 hours before you check in, and then they just leave you alone. So in my case, my room would just turn into a total disaster mess in the week, but they won't come in and do that for you, which is, it's kind of nice at least to have that option, unless if you ask them to come in and do turn down service or clean the room or whatever, they will, but aside from that, they won't. So I think it's just important to kind of like, don't just like launch yourself into a place, sort of ask them what they're doing, what steps they're taking. It's important to know like you were saying, like how seriously people are taking the whole thing. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to just be in community. This is kind of just a general rule of mine in general. If you just be communicative with the people, your hosts, your whomever, the people you're staying with, all that kind of stuff, and just see where they're at with the whole thing, because that just makes it more comfortable for them to be like, okay, this person is on it, they're paying attention, therefore they probably don't have this. It just eases both sides. It's becoming kind of like where people are worried to host us as Americans, and we're sort of hesitant to go places. And it's nice to be like, hey man, I'm going to come to your hotel. Are you COVID compliant, please? And also I'm taking a test before I get there. Like, cool. It's just, a little transparency on both sides is really good.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are a lot of like badges and other things kind of coming out. Like the World Tourism Organization has a badge that, any tour operator, hotel, any sort of business in tourism can, sort of attain or get, which means
they get like certified, right?
We did there's also one through the ATTA, the Adventure Travel Trade Association, has come out with like a COVID-19 health and safety badge. So it, it's a whole laundry list of, practices and things that are in place. So, looking for things like that. A lot of the local tourism boards in specific countries also have some sort of, badge or compliance that they've, certain businesses can apply to get, or, prove that they are doing X, Y, and Z. So yeah, there's a lot of things like that coming out. So, looking for those things and understanding what they mean. And again, like you said, Andrew, just like doing the race, asking, what, we used to, as like a responsible travel company and, look, prioritizing like sustainable and eco-friendly travel, we used to encourage travelers to ask about, water conservation or, other kinds of things at the places that they stay. And now, it's, time to start asking about, sanitary measures and hygiene and, also, something to bear in mind is that, having access to like, clean water and hand washing, which, not all countries, it's gonna, it's not gonna be ubiquitous everywhere. So, things that you might not think about that you take for granted, might not be as available in places that you go. But yeah, like you said, Andrew, there's just, businesses all over the world are, taking all these months, they've got nothing but time right now. And they are,
too. I'm doing the same
doing
thing.
everything
Like,
they
this
can
better?
to make sure that as soon as possible, they can hit the ground running with, providing
Definitely.
the safest experience as possible.
Yeah.
Linnell? Yeah.
I just thought of something. I know it's very site specific, but has there been any information or articles about public transportation options and what might be, train versus like if we go from town to town in Europe or something, the safety of that?
Yeah, I'll share an article that I just read recently. But, the obvious answer is that, car travel is the safest. And then there are, a lot of considerations. So there's an article from CN Traveler about the safest modes of transportation. I will say there is some misconceptions about air travel, that, it is often a lot safer than people think. I mean, I'm not saying it's 100% safe. Nothing is at the moment. But, in terms of the air filtration and, the fact that everyone's required to wear masks on the plane and there's a lot of factors that are reducing the risk. In fact, I think the article even touches on traveling by car might be safer in terms of COVID, but then you have more of a chance of getting in a car accident, right? So like, is car travel really safer than plane travel? So it's not. There's lots of things to consider.
It's all risky. It's all risky. You just
Well,
have to take it with a grain of salt and just go anyway.
Yeah,
what I
at
mean?
the end of the
Life
day,
has
Tree could fall on my
things.
house while I'm sitting in my house.
There we go.
Yeah,
There we
yeah.
go. I mean, we got to proceed with caution and be aware of these things, but that you could, your roof could fall in right now, or you could be in Mexico having a nice time and not have your roof fall in. Who knows? You never know. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. And as travelers, I assume most people in this call are either active or occasional travelers, or at least want to be. But there's always inherent risk in travel.
Sure.
It's something that we do anyway. We want to do. We're okay with the risk. Is it any what is the real risk versus the perceived risk? Yeah, figuring out what the real numbers are and doing your research and then making a choice that's, right for you. Shelly asked in the chat, how are things, how does all this information or considerations different for people who are looking to rent an apartment long-term? So I know, Philip, that's probably you a little bit as well. You might be doing, some sort of apartment stays as you're going around for a year and a half. And that, yeah, for sure. Different considerations. Anybody want to jump in there before I do?
I would just say really quickly, just the same kind of thing, like contact the person who's renting the apartment and ask them if they can sort of sterilize or COVID clean the place. I know that Airbnb also is doing kind of like Laura was referring to, sort of a certification that's specifically for Airbnb, not just for like a private rental of a place. They were doing kind of certification of like COVID clean, like stamp or whatever they ended up calling it. But yeah, again, like that sort of direct and clear communication with the person who's going to be your host of asking for that, if they can just be kind of more, more clean, more COVID safe with the whole thing, I think would be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, if you're doing long-term travel and renting an apartment, I think it's a good thing to consider the prospect of quarantining yourself arriving in the country, if you have that option. If you're going to be there long term, that's something that you can do even if it's not required, that is helps mitigate. And then of course once as you're in that place, it's the same things that are being promoted and maybe not always done in the US in terms of mask wearing, social distancing, hand washing, all the same practices when you're living in a community that we do to help mitigate the spread within that community. Someone's asked, looks like to me, about health or travel insurance, health costs, travel insurance, COVID times. That is an excellent and complicated question. Travel insurance has gone through some interesting changes in the last 6 months, and will continue to probably. So we have a whole other talk that we did on travel insurance a month or two ago, which I can send to you. But the moral of the story is that travel insurance really doesn't cover anything related to COVID, except for maybe contracting COVID and the health costs associated with that. A lot of policies will cover that, perhaps, but it's not going to cover changes or cancellations or anything like that in your travel plans. Some policies do have like a add-on that you can pay for, and it's not cheap, which is a cancel for any reason policy, which then you may be able to cancel your trip for COVID related reasons or any related reasons. And the best ways to analyze health costs and insurance issues. So if you're talking about like the cost of healthcare in different countries, there's a lot of articles and websites that are devoted to like expat living, which are often geared towards Social Security and retired age. So there's a lot of information geared towards that sector and the healthcare costs in different countries. So that's one avenue that would be good to look into. But yeah, I would say, have a good travel insurance policy. Some countries require them now. Have a good insurance policy, and, there's no other, the best way to answer your question is just to, whatever country it is that you're looking to go to, you're just going to need to investigate, the healthcare options and costs. If you're looking to compare and find, which country has the best, I think that's actually one of the parameters that's talked about in that Forbes article. So that might be one resource. I don't know. I can see if I can find another one, but I don't have one off the top of my head. Before we, start to wrap up, I just wanted to share, this is pulled today from the Points guy, actually, who's been doing a lot of articles about travel. So this is, a list of places that you can currently travel. Now, again, we're going to reiterate, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. But, if anybody has any specific questions or thoughts about any of these particular places, anything, if these happen to be somewhere that someone's considering traveling to, I can try, or, within the group, perhaps, people might know more about specific places like this. For example, I know Costa Rica, like I said, there's about a dozen states. You have to have a driver's license from that state in order to travel. Ireland and the UK, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks upon arrival. And, please, for the love of everything, do the things that are required. There are reports and stories coming out of people, Americans traveling to Ireland and, ignoring the quarantine and going off to bars and pubs and restaurants. And, that's the kind of thing that's going to get Americans banned. So please definitely follow all of the restrictions that are in place. So that's, where Americans can travel. And then any other questions about anything related to travel safety and in the times of COVID? Does anybody have a trip? We've talked to a couple people that have trips planned in the upcoming few months. Anybody else in the next 6 to 12, between now and 12 months from now, hoping to travel or have something planned?
Well, I'm certainly hoping. I don't have anything planned. I cannot believe that this has had to go on for so long and it's not gonna shift, but I'm just kind of waiting for some places to open to me in the US and California to make my plans.
Yeah, I would say that's another thing that, is a very big trend right now with travel is last minute, booking and planning. Planning something 6 months out is not as appealing for a lot of reasons these days, as opposed to, doing it much closer to when it's happening so that what's going to happen. Shelley's going to Ireland depending on the election results. Yeah, that's a thing.
I've canceled a couple of things and not gotten refunds.
Oh no.
I was supposed to, for a company, photograph the Mummers Parade in Philly over New Year's. And they were going to put me up at the Ritz-Carlton. It was going to be wonderful. I believe the parade has been canceled. No one has told me that yet, but I'm not going to go. And in May, I was supposed to take an inaugural, very small ship ocean cruise that I'm not taking. I have taken a riverboat cruise for the last 15 years, every summer. And I'm not going back on a small ship because of their own viruses and everything else. And so for the end of 2021, I'm going to do a photography tour of Yosemite and a couple of other parks. And hopefully that'll be safe. But this is going to be the first time I ventured out of the United States.
Oh, okay. It would have been the first time you ventured
I
out of.
think so. I
Okay.
mostly go to Europe.
Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, Linnell.
Well, I had a house sitting in Hawaii in May that got,
Ooh.
so I took my airline ticket from there to move it to my little place in Mexico for November. And then my passport got delayed. So I moved that to February, and then I got my passport back. So Mexico in February, crossing my fingers. And then a trip I was supposed to be going to India in this November, I took the deposit for that and moved it to a sailing trip in Corsica and Sardinia next September. So a year from today, actually. So we'll see. We'll cross our fingers on that one.
Yeah, we're all crossing our fingers for 2021, definitely. I know there's a lot of people out there that are hoping for a vaccine, and that's obviously a possibility. I think testing is another thing that's really going to improve in 2021, and if there's access to frequent testing, then that can help open things up again, hopefully.
Oh, and my son and I are going camping in San Diego next month. That's my beach vacation.
Yeah, I mean, doing like those off in nature kind of trips and domestic trips, those are really great ways to get a little of that wanderlust satisfied in a safe way. So Shelley, you're going to Ireland. Are you going to be able to, are you quarantining when you get there? Are you going to be able, are you going long term, right? You were the one asking about long term. Well, well, yeah, I mean, we can start to wrap up. If you want to sort of find us and connect, there are quite a few ways that you can do that. If you have any questions that you wanted to follow up with after today's event, feel free to email us at traversejourneys.com. And Andrew, if you want to write your email into the chat box, feel free.
Yeah, definitely. I'll do that right now.
And yeah, Traverse Journeys and Andrew's, we're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We have a lot of recordings of our previous events that we've done, like the destination specific events and the other travel talks. Like I mentioned, we did one about travel insurance. So you can find all those recordings on YouTube. If you're not a part of our meetup groups, we have meetup groups in 19 different cities, which eventually we'll get back to in-person events. But we do have another event coming up at the end of September, which it hasn't gone live yet, but it'll be a destination-specific event all about Italy. So we'll get to connect with our Italian guide and talk about, virtually traveling to Italy together. And then in October, we'll have an event for Japan and another, sort of informal chat like this. So if there's any topics that you're, wanting us to cover, feel free to, let me know. We'll always take those suggestions into consideration. So yeah, anybody else have anything to add or ask before we wrap things up? Go ahead.
I have a quick question for Andrew.
Yeah.
I was thinking about going to Cuba also, and the idea was that when I was in Mexico City, I could just fly to Havana, go see Cuba, and then fly back to Mexico City and continue on. But then I read stuff about Cuba. They said Cuba is open kind of in name only. And what they do is they have the restrictions are so severe. They still want the tourists to come over and spend lots of money. But what they do, they force you to go straight from the airport directly out to some remote island where they just have big tourist hotels. They don't allow you to see Cuba at all. And you can't leave the hotel. You can check into the hotel. You're not allowed to leave the hotel or the hotel grounds. And then when your vacation's over, they bus you right back to the airplane and get rid of you. And you can't really see Cuba at all. And so I was just going to skip it. And I was wondering if you had heard anything different or better or anything.
I have heard that exact thing, except also with an armed guard on the bus. So don't go to Cuba right now unless you really like resorts that aren't good. Not to like dissuade you from going to a country that I totally love and that we have a ton of great people that live and work there and are amazing. The thing that they're doing right now with their tourism is exactly that. They pick you up from the Havana airport, they put you on a bus, they make sure you do not get off that bus by having a security guard. They take you to remote keys, like small islands off of the island of Cuba, and they put you in like not great, what are they called, resorts. So I would check and see if it changes. Cuba's amazing and I highly recommend going to visit. Don't visit if that's the situation. Like if you're looking for resort travel, Mexico is much better at resort travel. Cuba's not good at resort travel. They're very, very good at other things. It's an amazing cultural place to go. Their resorts are just not good. It's like yeah, it's not good. And again, I don't mean to slander nor dissuade people from going and visiting Cuba. They could definitely use the tourist money, but like, don't do it under those conditions. It's not a good move. But
Yeah,
do check to
I
see
would
if
second that.
Pardon?
And I'd second that and say it's a beautiful place, and
Yeah.
you know, you want to go and you want to be with the people and the culture.
Yes.
It's really different. But I'm curious, what's with the armed guards on the buses? And I guess you've told me that the people aren't flying directly to the islands. They're flying into Havana, which maybe is why Havana has you know, they're in quarantine right now, Havana.
They're quarantined, right? They're just trying to not. I mean, to their credit, they're trying to keep tourists that could have. They've really done a good job of containing COVID in Cuba. Their medical system is great. They're also, you know, run very strictly. So they like got down to business, shut things down, kicked out tourists. They got rid of it really quickly. So I think in their defense, they don't want the reintroduction or the respread of COVID. And they put an armed guard on the bus to make sure that doesn't happen. That just is. So Cuba in general, like you said, it's the beauty, the nice part of Cuba is the actual cultural interacting with the people, and they're discouraging you or actually not allowing you to interact with the people. So I'm as much as I promote tour. I mean, I've been to Cuba 40 times or so. I love it, but it's not the time to go. Like the good parts of Cuba are not those resorts.
Oh, how about another Cuba question? The legal side of it. I've heard that if you can't jump through all the legal hoops, that one way you can do it is just go from Mexico City, and there's a way that they can stamp your U.S. passport, but they stamp the passport on some kind of extra pages that you can then remove, and that way you can just act like
on a visa,
Cuba, you know, and just act like you never went, it never happened, and then you can't get in any trouble.
It's super easy to still go legally. You can do that way, but you can so basically there are 12 reasons of why you can legally go to Cuba. Now with the new, the current administration here in the United States took away one of those reasons, but there's 11 reasons why you can still legally go. It's still, if you do end up going, so Philip, take I wrote my email in the chat, email me about it, and I can show you how you can still do it legally. So you don't have to do the like around the corner way. It's still really easy to legally do it. And you don't have to run the risk of like, you know, like saying you're not there if you're there and all that kind of stuff. It's just as easy to do it legally as it is to do it like illegally. So you might as well just do it. It's like from Mexico, I think it's $30 to get the visa. It's simple.
Yeah, I like to avoid jail when I can.
Yeah, you don't want to do some jail time. It's less good. It's $30 to not go to jail.
Always worth it.
It's so worth it. Yeah, totally. Yeah, write down my email address. If anyone has questions about Cuba, feel free to write me. And again, like any other time except right now with the current, like put you on a bus and ship you into the outer lands. Those beaches are really beautiful, but it's just not what you want to see. Yeah. That's my opinion.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll probably start to wrap up here. Thanks everyone for joining and for participating and adding in, you know, your experiences and thoughts and questions. It's great to connect and talk about travel and, you know, stay optimistic for when we can all travel again, you know, hopefully as soon as possible. As long as we can travel responsibly, it's, you know, it's going to be a wonderful thing to start, you know, exploring the world again. And there are so many places that are just, you know, waiting, biding their time and ready and wanting to welcome us back. So hopefully soon, in the safest and you know, least risky ways possible. So yeah, with that said, thank you again for joining us, and I hope to see you at another event soon. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us as well.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me. Yeah, like I was telling Philip, my email address is there in the little chat if anyone wants to chat Latin America or just travel in general. You know, I'm not working these days. Give me something give me a topic. We'll talk.
Yeah, always happy to chat travel.
Exactly. I'll talk about travel anytime.
Awesome. Well,
Thank you,
have a good
guys.
evening, everyone, and
Absolutely.
be safe.